In the vast tapestry of the cosmos, where 1,000 alien civilizations have risen and fallen across millennia, one truth echoes through the stars. Every species carries within them the seeds of both creation and destruction. But when humanity finally broke free from their blue marble prison and stepped into the galactic community, they brought something unprecedented, a duality so profound that it would reshape the very fabric of interstellar society. The galaxy had seen conquerors who burned worlds to ash and saints who sacrificed everything for peace. What they had never witnessed was a single species capable of both extremes, often within the same individual, sometimes within the same heartbeat. Humanity didn't just enter the galactic stage. They shattered every assumption about what sentient life could become. This is the story of how one species' capacity for both infinite cruelty and boundless compassion became the catalyst that would either unite the galaxy in unprecedented harmony or tear it apart in ways unimaginable. Because when you cross humanity with cruelty, empires tremble. And when you cross humanity with kindness, the very stars weep with joy. The choice, as it turned out, would not be humanity's alone to make. Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the viewport of the UES Prometheus, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace streak past like liquid starlight. In 6 hours, they would emerge at the Nexus Prime space station, humanity's first official diplomatic mission to the Galactic Council. The weight of representing an entire species pressed down on her shoulders like the gravity of a dying star. Captain, incoming transmission from Admiral Chun. Lieutenant Torres called from the communication station. Elena nodded and made her way to her command chair, straightening her uniform. The pristine white and gold of Earth's United Space Navy felt alien against her brown skin, a constant reminder that she was venturing into unknown territory. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing Admiral Chen's weathered face. Behind him, Elena could see the familiar blue marble of Earth through the observation deck of Luna Station. It seemed impossibly small now, knowing what lay beyond. Captain Vasquez, I trust your journey has been smooth, Admiral Chen began, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through decades of service. I'm transmitting the latest intelligence briefings from our advanced scouts. What you're about to encounter will challenge everything we thought we knew about galactic civilization. Elena accepted the data packet with a gesture, feeling the familiar tingle as the neural interface downloaded terabytes of information directly into her consciousness. The images that flooded her mind made her breath catch. Crystalline cities that stretched across entire continents, species that existed as pure energy, beings of metal, and circuits who had transcended biological limitations thousands of years ago. The Galactic Council consists of 47 member species, Admiral Chun continued. Each represents a different approach to existence, but they all share one common trait. They've moved beyond the barbarism that once defined their early civilizations. Violence, war, conquest, these are concepts they consider relics of primitive development. Elena nodded, though something cold settled in her stomach. And humanity, Admiral, how do they view us? The pause that followed spoke volumes. That, Captain, is what we're about to find out. The preliminary reports from Ambassador Morrison's advance team suggest they see us as curious. We're the first species they've encountered that still maintains standing military forces, that still resolves conflicts through warfare. They find it simultaneously fascinating and disturbing. The transmission ended, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and the gentle hum of the ship's engines. She made her way through the corridors of the Prometheus, a vessel that represented the pinnacle of human engineering. Its hull bore the scars of the Titan War, when humanity had fought itself to near extinction over the mineral rights to Saturn's moons. Those same weapons that had once turned human cities to glass now protected this ship as it carried hope to the stars. In the observation lounge, she found Commander Marcus Kane reviewing tactical assessments. His cybernetic eye glowed softly as data streams flowed across his enhanced vision. The war had taken his left eye, but it had given him something else, the ability to process information at superhuman speeds. "Penny for your thoughts, Marcus," Elena said, settling into the chair beside him. He looked up, and for a moment, the hardened soldier facade slipped away, revealing the man beneath. "I keep thinking about the Proxima Rebellion, how we put down an entire colonial uprising in 3 days. The efficiency of it all." He gestured to the data flowing across his display. These species were about to meet. They've been at peace for centuries, some for millennia. What happens when they learn what we're capable of? Elena followed his gaze to the tactical displays showing human military capabilities. The numbers were sobering. In just 2 centuries of spaceflight, humanity had developed weapons systems that could sterilize entire worlds. Not through malice, but through necessity, the harsh realities of expansion in a universe that seemed determined to kill them at every turn. "Maybe that's exactly what they need to learn," she said finally. "Peace is precious because it can be lost." The ship's intercom crackled to life. "Captain to the bridge. We're approaching the Nexus Prime transition point." Elena made her way back to the command center, where her crew was preparing for their return to normal space. The Prometheus shuddered as the hyperspace engines wound down, and the swirling colors outside the viewport suddenly snapped into the stark blackness of space, punctuated by distant stars. "My God," Lieutenant Torres whispered. Before them hung Nexus Prime, a structure that defied every principle of engineering Elena had ever learned. It wasn't built so much as grown, a living amalgamation of crystal, metal, and what appeared to be solidified light. Thousands of kilometers across, it housed representatives from every member species of the Galactic Council. Ships of impossible designs drifted around it like metallic insects, their forms following aesthetic principles that hurt to contemplate. "Incoming transmission, Captain," Torres reported. It's beautiful." The voice that filled the bridge was like music given form, harmonious tones that seemed to resonate directly with their neural pathways. "Welcome, children of Earth. I am Harmony of Distant Stars, speaker for the Ethereal Collective. We have prepared chambers suited to your biological requirements. Please follow the guidance beacons." As the Prometheus moved toward the docking bays, Elena noticed something that made her skin crawl. Every ship they passed was unarmed. Not just minimally armed or defensively equipped, completely without weapons of any kind. These beings had transcended the need for violence so completely that they had forgotten it was possible. The docking procedure was smooth, almost unnaturally so. Mechanical arms of impossible delicacy guided the human vessel into a berth that seemed to reshape itself to accommodate their ship's unique design. As the airlock sealed and atmosphere equalized, Elena gathered her diplomatic team in the shuttle bay. "Remember," she addressed the group, "we represent all of humanity today. Our words and actions will determine whether our species is welcomed into this galactic community or feared as a threat to their peace." Ambassador Sarah Morrison, a woman whose silver hair and sharp intelligence had served Earth well in countless negotiations, stepped forward. "Captain, there's something you should know." During my preliminary talks, several council members expressed concern about humanity's duality. They've been studying our transmissions, our history, our art. They're fascinated by our capacity for both creation and destruction, but they don't understand it. What do you mean? Elena asked. Morrison's expression grew troubled. Take the same human who writes poetry about the beauty of sunrise, and, under the right circumstances, they'll fight to the death to protect what they love. To these beings, such contradictions are alien. They've evolved or chosen paths of pure logic, pure emotion, or pure transcendence. We're the first species they've encountered that embodies all possibilities simultaneously. The airlock opened, revealing a corridor that seemed to exist in dimensions Elena's eyes couldn't properly process. Waiting for them was a delegation that could have stepped from humanity's wildest dreams or nightmares. Beings of living crystal whose thoughts manifested as visible light patterns, cybernetic entities whose bodies were works of art as much as function, and creatures that existed as controlled energy fields, barely contained by force field projectors. At their head stood a figure that was almost human in appearance, if humans were carved from starlight and given form. This was Harmony of Distant Stars, and when it spoke, Elena felt the words as much as heard them. Welcome, representatives of humanity. We gather in the chamber of first meetings, where all new species present themselves to the council. This is a momentous day. The first time in 3,000 years the new member has sought to join our collective. As they walked through corridors that shifted and flowed like liquid architecture, Elena noticed how other beings stopped to stare at the human delegation, not with hostility, but with the kind of curiosity reserved for exotic animals in a zoo. Some maintained respectful distances, while others approached with obvious fascination. A being that appeared to be made of living mathematics, its form constantly shifting between geometric patterns, floated closer. Forgive my intrusion, but I am calculation of infinite variables. I have studied your species' development patterns, and I must ask, how do you reconcile your capacity for both altruism and aggression within the same individual consciousness? Elena exchanged glances with Morrison before answering. We don't reconcile them. We balance them. The same protective instinct that makes us willing to die for our children makes us dangerous to those who would harm them. The mathematical being's form shifted rapidly, processing this information. Fascinating. Most species develop along singular paths. The ethereals chose transcendence, abandoning physical form. The architects chose logic, suppressing emotional responses. The gardeners chose harmony, eliminating competitive drives. You have chosen everything. We didn't choose, Elena replied. We just are. They entered the chamber of first meetings, and Elena's breath caught in her throat. The space was vast beyond comprehension, its walls displaying what appeared to be the entire visible universe in real time. 47 distinct areas were arranged in a complex pattern, each designed to accommodate the unique needs of different species. At the center was a speaking platform that seemed to exist in a state of quantum superposition, simultaneously solid and ethereal. As the human delegation took their positions, Elena felt the weight of thousands of years of galactic history pressing down on her. These beings had achieved what humanity had dreamed of: true peace, transcendence of their base natures, harmony with the universe itself. And yet, as she looked around at their perfect, peaceful civilization, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The formal proceedings began with what could only be described as a symphony of introduction. Each species presented themselves through their preferred communication method, some through pure mathematics, others through controlled emotional broadcasts, still others through artistic displays that painted meaning directly onto the observer's consciousness. When humanity's turn came, Elena stepped forward onto the central platform. The attention of 47 species focused on her like a physical weight. I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth ship Prometheus, speaking for humanity and our home system of soul. We come before this council not as supplicants, but as equals seeking our place among the stars. We bring with us our history, our dreams, our flaws, and our potential. A ripple of communication passed through the assembled delegates. Elena could feel their confusion at her words. The concept of presenting flaws alongside achievements was apparently foreign to them. "We have studied your species extensively," came a voice like grinding stone. Elena turned to see a delegate that appeared to be composed entirely of living rock, its form ancient and weathered. "You are unique among all species we have encountered. Your history is written in blood and stardust, destruction and creation intertwined so completely that we struggle to understand where one ends and the other begins." Elena nodded. "That's because they don't end. They coexist. The same passion that drives us to create art drives us to defend it. The same curiosity that leads us to explore the universe makes us dangerous when threatened. We are not a species of extremes. We are a species of synthesis. And what of your wars?" This from a being of pure energy, its form crackling with controlled lightning. "We have observed your conflicts, the wholesale destruction of your own kind over resources, ideology, territory. How can a species that inflicts such suffering upon itself be trusted with the peace we have built here?" The question Elena had been dreading. She looked back at her team, seeing the same uncertainty in their eyes. This was the moment that would define humanity's future among the stars. Because, Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber, those same wars taught us the value of peace. Every conflict, every loss, every moment of darkness made us understand what we were losing. A species that has never known war can appreciate peace, but they cannot truly value it. They cannot fight for it when it's threatened. Silence fell over the chamber like a blanket. Elena could feel the weight of their consideration, the collective processing of concepts that challenged their fundamental understanding of civilization. Finally, Harmony of Distant Stars spoke, its voice carrying harmonics of uncertainty for the first time. "You present us with a paradox, children of Earth. You claim that your capacity for violence makes you better protectors of peace. This is contrary to all our experience." "Then, perhaps," Elena replied, "your experience is incomplete." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Elena immediately regretted them. But before she could soften the statement, something unexpected happened. A new voice spoke from the gallery, young, uncertain, but carrying an edge of desperation that made everyone turn. "She's right." The speaker was a being Elena didn't recognize from any of the species files. Humanoid in basic structure, but with skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and eyes that held depths of ancient sorrow. As it stepped forward, Elena could see the tension that suddenly filled the chamber. Representative Void Between Stars, Harmony said, its voice carrying subtle harmonics of disapproval. "This is most irregular." The Umbral Collective withdrew from active council participation centuries ago. "Because we saw what was coming," Void Between Stars replied, its voice like whispers in empty space. "And because we were too weak to stop it." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "What's coming?" Void Between Stars turned its dark gaze on her. "The Devourers. A species that makes your wars look like children's games. They consume entire civilizations, not for resources or territory, but for the simple joy of destruction. They've been moving through the outer rim for decades, and our scouts estimate they'll reach council space within the next solar cycle. The chamber erupted into chaos. Communications flowed in dozens of forms as species processed this information. Elena could see fear in forms she had never imagined. Crystalline beings whose light patterns flickered with distress, energy entities whose controlled fields became erratic, cybernetic delegates whose perfect forms suddenly seemed fragile. "You have no proof of this," came a voice like wind through crystal caves. A tall, ethereal being that seemed to exist partially outside of normal space stepped forward. The Umbral Collective has spread rumors of external threats for millennia. Always, these threats prove to be phantom fears. No proof. Void Between Stars' laugh was like the sound of dying stars. The Kepler cluster, 37 inhabited systems, 8 billion sentient beings. They went silent 6 months ago. Our deep space monitors show their star systems have been stripped of all artificial constructs. Even the planets have been mined down to their cores. Elena felt her blood run cold. The scale of destruction being described was beyond anything in human history. How many devourers are there? Unknown. They don't communicate. They don't negotiate. They don't even seem to recognize other species as anything more than resources to be processed. The few survivors we've found speak of ships the size of moons, swarms that blot out entire star systems, and a hunger that can never be satisfied. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Elena looked around at the assembled delegates and saw something that chilled her more than the threat itself. Complete helplessness. These beings had transcended warfare so completely that they had no idea how to face a threat that couldn't be reasoned with, negotiated with, or transcended. What did the Outer Rim colonies do when the Devourers arrived? Elena asked. They tried to establish communication. When that failed, they tried to evacuate. When that proved impossible, Void Between Stars paused, its form seeming to dim further. They died, all of them, and, in dying, they fed the Devourer's hunger for destruction. Elena felt something shift inside her, a familiar feeling she recognized from her military days. The moment when uncertainty crystallized into purpose, when the mission became clear. She looked around the chamber at beings who had built a civilization based on the very highest ideals of sentient life and realized they were about to become extinct because they had forgotten that ideals sometimes needed to be defended. "How long did you say we have?" she asked. "Perhaps a year. Maybe less if they've found the hyperspace route nexus at Centauri Station." Elena turned to Ambassador Morrison. "Give me a direct line to Admiral Chun. Emergency priority." "Captain," Morrison whispered, "you can't be thinking what I think you're thinking." But Elena was already walking toward the communication array, her mind racing through tactical possibilities. Behind her, the most advanced civilization in the galaxy continued to debate the philosophical implications of an approaching apocalypse, while Elena Vasquez began planning humanity's first truly galactic war. The duality that had made humanity so difficult for the Council to understand was about to become the galaxy's only hope for survival. Because sometimes, Elena reflected as she began composing her message to Earth, the capacity for cruelty was just kindness wearing armor. 3 weeks after the emergency session at Nexus Prime, the galaxy had transformed into something unrecognizable. Where once peaceful trade routes had connected thriving civilizations, now refugee fleets stretched across light years, carrying the survivors of worlds that had ceased to exist in anything but memory. Admiral Zhang Wei stood in the tactical center of the UES Leviathan, humanity's first dreadnought built specifically for interstellar warfare. Around him, holographic displays showed a three-dimensional map of local space that grew darker with each passing hour as system after system went silent. The Devourers were moving faster than anyone had predicted. Admiral, incoming transmission from the ethereal evacuation fleet at Rigel 7. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim reported, her voice tight with controlled emotion. They're requesting immediate military escort. Devourer scouts have been detected in their outer system. Zhang nodded grimly. In the 3 weeks since Captain Vasquez had made her fateful contact with Earth, humanity had mobilized on a scale not seen since the colonial wars. Every shipyard from Earth to the Tau Ceti colonies was working around the clock, converting civilian vessels into warships and rushing the completion of military hulls that had been decades from deployment. Deploy the Third Fleet. Full escort protocol. Zhang turned to his tactical officer. And, Lieutenant, tell Captain Morrison to be ready to engage. The Devourers don't seem to care about our evacuation efforts, but they will respond to military targets. The irony wasn't lost on him. For 3 weeks, the Galactic Council had debated while humanity had acted. Every species that had spent millennia perfecting the arts of peace found themselves paralyzed when confronted with an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with. But humans, violent, contradictory, dangerous humans, had immediately understood what needed to be done. The main display shifted to show the most recent intelligence reports from the Outer Rim. What they revealed made Zhang's blood run cold. The Devourers weren't just destroying civilizations, they were learning from them. Each conquered system revealed new tactical innovations, technologies assimilated, and turned into more efficient tools of destruction. "Sir," came a voice from behind him. Zhang turned to see Captain Elena Vasquez, recently promoted and assigned as a strategic advisor. The weeks of constant crisis had aged her visibly, but her eyes held the same determined fire that had first impressed him during the Nexus Prime incident. "Elena, tell me you have good news." She gestured to her datapad, and the tactical display shifted to show a detailed analysis of Devourer movement patterns. Not good news exactly, but useful intelligence. We've been tracking their expansion pattern, and there's something they don't want us to see. Zhang leaned forward, studying the holographic projection. "Explain." "Look at their advance pattern. It's not random, and it's not following standard galactic geography. They're avoiding certain systems entirely, systems that should be prime targets based on population and resources." Elena highlighted several star systems on the map. These regions have been left completely untouched, despite being directly in their path. "What's special about them?" "That's what I thought you'd ask." Elena's expression grew troubled. "They're all dead systems. Stars that have gone nova, planets that have been strip-mined, regions of space that were battlefields during ancient wars. The Devourers are avoiding areas where massive destruction has already occurred." Zhang processed this information, his tactical mind immediately grasping the implications. They feed on the act of destruction, not the aftermath. Exactly, which means they're not just destroying for resources, they're destroying for the experience itself. The fear, the suffering, the moment when hope turns to despair. They're not conquerors, Admiral. They're predators, and their prey is the living spirit of entire civilizations. The weight of this revelation settled over the tactical center like a shroud. Around them, officers continued their work with the quiet efficiency of professionals, but Zhang could see the impact of Elena's words in their faces. They weren't just fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for the right of consciousness to exist in the universe. Status report on the defensive preparations? Zhang asked, forcing himself to focus on actionable intelligence. Commander Kim looked up from her station. The Forge Worlds have completed the first batch of quantum torpedoes. The new targeting systems are showing 97% accuracy in simulations. The architects have provided us with shield harmonics for all Council species, and the Garters have agreed to evacuate their population centers to the inner systems. And the Council's response to our tactical recommendations? Elena's expression darkened. Mixed at best. The Ethereals are cooperating fully. They understand the threat. But the Pure Logic Coalition is still trying to establish communication protocols with the Devourers. They can't accept that some problems don't have rational solutions. Zhang pulled up the latest diplomatic reports, scanning through pages of debate transcripts and philosophical arguments. Even facing extinction, some species couldn't abandon the principles that had defined their civilizations for millennia. It would have been admirable if it weren't potentially suicidal. Admiral, Lieutenant Kim called out urgently. Priority transmission from Captain Morrison of the Third Fleet. They've made contact with the enemy. The main display shifted to show Captain Jessica Morrison aboard the bridge of the UES Retribution. Behind her, Zhang could see the organized chaos of a ship preparing for combat. Morrison's face was grim, but her voice carried the steady confidence of an experienced combat officer. Admiral, we've engaged Devourer scouts at the edge of the Rigel system. Initial analysis confirms our worst fears about their capabilities. The transmission flickered as the ship shuddered under weapon fire. They're not using conventional technology. These ships are grown, not built, and they're adapting to our tactics in real time. The tactical feed from Morrison's ship painted a terrifying picture. The Devourer vessels were unlike anything in human military doctrine, organic-looking constructs that seemed to flow through space rather than fly. As Zhang watched, one of the alien ships literally absorbed a direct hit from a plasma cannon, its hull rippling and reforming around the impact point. They're learning our weapons' signatures, Morrison continued, her ship's weapons fire visible in the background. Each time we fire, they become more resistant to that specific type of damage. We need to vary our attack patterns constantly. Casualties? Zhang asked, though he dreaded the answer. The USS Defiance took a direct hit from some kind of entropy weapon. The entire forward section just aged centuries in seconds. They're gone, Admiral. 300 souls, and they died of old age in the space of heartbeats. Zhang felt something cold settle in his chest. Weapons that could manipulate time itself weren't just advanced technology. They represented a fundamental understanding of the universe that humanity was centuries from achieving. But as he watched Morrison's tactical display, he noticed something that gave him a glimmer of hope. Captain, their formation patterns. Are they maintaining consistent positioning relative to each other? Morrison's eyes narrowed as she studied her own displays. Yes, sir. Even as they adapt to our weapons, they're keeping perfect geometric formations. It's like they're following some kind of mathematical imperative. Elena stepped forward, her expression brightening with sudden understanding. They're not just predators, they're perfectionist predators. They can't tolerate chaos in their own ranks, even while creating it in others. Zhang began to see the tactical possibility emerging. Captain Morrison, I'm transmitting new targeting coordinates. Ignore their ships, and focus your fire on the spaces between them. Force them to break formation to avoid friendly fire. Sir, that goes against every principle of space combat doctrine. Yes, it does. Do it anyway. The feed from Morrison's ship showed the immediate results of Zhang's gambit. As human weapons fire began saturating the spaces between Devourer vessels, the aliens found themselves in an impossible position. They could maintain their perfect formations and suffer devastating collateral damage, or break formation and violate whatever mathematical principles govern their behavior. They chose a third option that revealed even more about their nature. The Devourer's ships began to physically merge with each other, creating larger, more complex vessels that could maintain geometric perfection while eliminating the vulnerability of gaps in their formation. My God, Morrison breathed over the calm. They're becoming a single entity. Admiral, we may have just made this situation much worse. But Zhang was studying the energy readings from the merged vessels, and what he saw filled him with the first real hope he'd felt in weeks. Captain, look at their power signatures. The merged ship is less than the sum of its parts. They're sacrificing efficiency for mathematical purity. Elena was already running calculations on her datapad. If we can force them to keep merging, we can create a target so large and energy inefficient that conventional weapons might actually be effective. The tactical implications were staggering. Humanity had stumbled upon a fundamental weakness in the Devourer's psychology, their inability to tolerate imperfection in their own structures. It was a weakness that could potentially be exploited on a strategic scale. Captain Morrison, withdraw to safe distance and prepare full tactical analysis for immediate transmission to all fleet commanders. This changes everything. As Morrison's fleet began its tactical withdrawal, Zhang turned to address his staff. I want every tactical team in the fleet working on formation-breaking strategies. If we can force the Devourers to choose between tactical flexibility and psychological comfort, we might have a chance. Admiral, Elena said quietly, there's something else we need to consider. If the Devourers are vulnerable to psychological manipulation, what does that say about their ultimate goals? Why are they really here? Before Zhang could respond, Lieutenant Kim's voice cut through the tactical center like a blade. Admiral, priority alert from deep space sensors. We have multiple massive contacts emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. The main display shifted to show long-range sensor readings that defied belief. Dozens of Devourer vessels, each one the size of Earth's moon, were translating into normal space in perfect geometric formations. Behind them came smaller vessels in numbers that made the display appear almost solid with contacts. How many? Zhang asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Conservative estimate, sir? 50,000 vessels. And, Admiral, they're not heading for the inhabited systems. Zhang felt ice form in his veins. Where are they going? They're heading directly for Nexus Prime. The implications hit everyone in the tactical center simultaneously. Nexus Prime wasn't just the seat of galactic government. It was the most densely populated structure in known space. Over 1 trillion sentient beings from 47 species called it home. If the Devourers were targeting it specifically, the loss of life would be beyond calculation. But more than that, Elena realized as she stared at the tactical display, the Devourers were making a statement. They weren't just destroying civilizations randomly. They were going for the heart of galactic civilization itself. This was personal. All fleets, emergency mobilization, Zhang ordered. Every ship humanity has, every vessel our allies can provide. We make our stand at Nexus Prime. As orders flew through the tactical center and emergency broadcasts went out across human space, Zhang found himself thinking about the conversation that had started this whole crisis. Elena had asked the Galactic Council to consider whether their experience was incomplete. Now, they were all about to discover together just how incomplete it had been. The duality that made humanity so dangerous was about to be tested on a scale that would either save the galaxy or ensure that the last species to learn the value of peace would also be the last species to die defending it. Because sometimes, Zhang reflected as he watched his fleets begin their desperate race against time, the kindest thing you could do for someone was to be more ruthless than their enemies. In the depths of space, humanity's war machine awakened fully for the first time since leaving Earth. And across the galaxy, 47 species who had spent millennia perfecting the arts of peace found themselves, depending on the one species that had never forgotten the art of war. The Battle of Nexus Prime began not with weapons fire or tactical maneuvers, but with a moment of absolute silence that stretched across space like a held breath. Admiral Zhang Wei stood on the bridge of a UES Leviathan, watching the largest fleet in human history arrange itself in defensive formations around the galactic capital. Nearly 3,000 human vessels, from massive dreadnoughts to converted civilian ships armed with mining lasers, faced an enemy force that outnumbered them 20-1. Around Nexus Prime, the great space station itself had transformed. The living architecture that had once flowed like art now bristled with defensive systems hastily installed by the Galactic Council's engineering corps. Shield generators borrowed from the architects created overlapping protective fields, while weapon systems designed by the gardeners sprouted from the station's surface like deadly flowers. But everyone knew the truth. These defenses had been designed to protect against natural disasters and accidents, not against an enemy that treated warfare as an art form. Final status report, Zhang requested, his voice carrying clearly through the bridge. Commander Kim looked up from her station, her face pale but determined. All human fleets report ready. The Ethereal Collective has provided energy support. The architects have given us computational assistance, and the gardeners have evacuated all non-essential personnel to the inner systems. The Pure Logic Coalition is still debating the ethical implications of defensive warfare. Zhang almost smiled at that. Even facing extinction, some species couldn't abandon their principles. There was something admirable about that kind of consistency, even if it was potentially suicidal. "What about our tactical analysis of the Devourer fleet?" he asked Captain Vasquez, who had been studying enemy formations for the past 6 hours. Elena's expression was troubled. "They've learned from our previous encounter, Admiral. The formation-breaking tactics that worked at Rigel aren't going to be as effective. They're maintaining geometric perfection while allowing for tactical flexibility. But there's something else, something I think we've been missing about their fundamental nature." "Explain." Elena manipulated the holographic display, showing the Devourer fleet in 3 dimensions. "Look at their approach pattern. They're not coming in for a quick strike. They're arranging themselves around Nexus Prime in what can only be described as a ceremonial formation. This isn't just an attack, it's a ritual." Zhang studied the enemy disposition and felt his blood run cold. Elena was right. The Devourers weren't positioned for maximum tactical advantage. They were positioned for maximum psychological impact. Their vessels arranged in complex geometric patterns that seemed designed to be appreciated as much as feared. They want an audience, he realized. This isn't about destroying Nexus Prime. It's about making the galaxy watch while they do it. Before Elena could respond, Lieutenant Kim's voice cut through the bridge. "Admiral, incoming transmission from the Devourer fleet. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was like nothing in human experience. Not because it was alien, but because it was terribly familiar. It spoke in perfect, unaccented Standard Galactic, with inflections and speech patterns that were hauntingly reminiscent of the Council species they were threatening. "Greetings, children of the Spiral Arm. We are the convergence of final understanding, though your limited perceptions interpret us as devourers. We come not as conquerors, but as teachers. For too long, This galaxy has labored under the delusion that consciousness can transcend its fundamental nature. You have built civilizations based on the fantasy that intelligence can overcome the entropy that governs all existence. Zhang felt ice form in his veins as he began to understand what they were facing. These weren't aliens at all. We were once like you, the voice continued, its tone carrying the patience of a teacher addressing slow students. 47 species working in harmony, believing that cooperation and understanding could create lasting peace. We built our own galactic confederation, achieved our own transcendence, reached our own pinnacle of civilization. And then we learned the truth. Elena was already running historical analysis programs, her face growing pale as correlations emerged on her displays. "Admiral," she whispered, "I'm detecting linguistic patterns, architectural similarities, even genetic markers. These aren't invaders from another galaxy. They're us," Zhang finished, the full horror of the situation becoming clear. They're what the Galactic Council could become. The Devourer transmission continued, oblivious to the revelation occurring aboard human vessels. We learned that all consciousness, all civilization, all hope is nothing more than a temporary aberration in the universe's journey toward perfect entropy. The kindest thing we can do for our younger selves is to teach them this lesson quickly, before they waste millennia on the illusion of progress. Zhang looked around his bridge at officers who had dedicated their lives to protecting civilization and saw his own horror reflected in their faces. They weren't fighting monsters. They were fighting teachers who wanted to show them that everything they valued was meaningless. "But we are not without mercy," the voice added, and Zhang could hear genuine compassion in its tone. "We will make your end swift and instructive. Your suffering will serve as education for any species that might follow your path. In destroying you, we honor what you might have become." The transmission ended, leaving the human fleet in stunned silence. Around them, the Galactic Council species were no doubt processing the same terrible revelation. Their perfect enemy wasn't some alien threat from beyond the galaxy. It was their own future come back to kill their past. "Admiral," Elena said quietly, "we need to reconsider everything. If the Devourers represent the ultimate evolution of galactic civilization, then fighting them isn't just about survival. It's about proving that their philosophy is wrong." Zhang nodded, his tactical mind already adapting to this new understanding of their enemy. They believe that consciousness is temporary, that all civilization ultimately leads to despair. But they're making one critical mistake, which is they think we're just another version of themselves. Zhang activated fleet communications, addressing every human vessel simultaneously. "All ships, all commanders, listen carefully. We've just learned that our enemy represents the logical endpoint of peaceful civilization. They've transcended war, conquest, and conflict, and in doing so, they've discovered that existence without struggle is existence without meaning." He paused, looking out at the geometric perfection of the Devourer fleet. "But they've never encountered a species that chose to embrace both creation and destruction, both peace and war, both kindness and cruelty. They've never faced humans. The first Devourer attack came not as weapons fire, but as a wave of pure despair transmitted directly into the minds of every conscious being within light years." Zhang felt it hit like a physical blow. The absolute certainty that nothing mattered, that all effort was futile, that the universe was fundamentally hostile to consciousness. Around him, he could see his crew staggering under the psychological assault. Several officers collapsed entirely, overwhelmed by an existential hopelessness so profound it made breathing feel pointless. But Zhang also noticed something the Devourers had not expected. Many of his people were still standing, still fighting, still functioning despite being exposed to philosophical despair weaponized into a direct attack. "Return fire," Zhang ordered, his voice carrying clearly through the bridge despite the oppressive weight of induced nihilism pressing down on everyone. "All weapons, full spread. Show them what humans do when the universe tells us we're meaningless." The human fleet opened fire with everything they had: plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, particle beam arrays, and weapon systems jury-rigged for mining equipment filled space with deadly light. But more importantly, they fired with a fury that had nothing to do with tactics and everything to do with defiance. The Devourers had expected their philosophical attack to paralyze their enemies, as it had every other species they had encountered. They had not expected to face beings who had spent their entire evolutionary history being told by the universe that they were insignificant specks of consciousness in an infinite void, and had responded by deciding to make noise anyway. "Direct hit on their command ship," Commander Kim reported, her voice shaking but determined. "Minimal damage, but, Admiral, look at their formation." Zhang studied the tactical display and felt hope stir in his chest for the first time since the battle began. The perfect geometric patterns of the Devourer fleet were disrupting as individual ships moved to avoid damage. Their commitment to philosophical purity was creating tactical vulnerabilities. "They can't accept chaos in their ranks," Elena observed, studying the enemy response patterns. "Even when it would be tactically advantageous, they're maintaining formation integrity above battlefield effectiveness." "Then, let's give them more chaos than they can process," Zhang decided. "All ships, random targeting. No patterns, no coordination, no logical sequence. Make every shot unpredictable." What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded history. Instead of the disciplined exchange of fire between organized fleets, the human forces began firing in completely random patterns. Ships targeted different enemies every few seconds, weapon types varied continuously, and approach vectors changed without tactical logic. The effect on the Devourer fleet was immediate and catastrophic. Vessels that had weathered direct hits from humanity's most powerful weapons began suffering systems failures as they tried to adapt to completely unpredictable attacks. Their perfected forms, designed to analyze and counter consistent threats, couldn't cope with the deliberate chaos of human desperation. "They're breaking formation," Kim reported with barely contained excitement. "Multiple Devourer vessels are moving to engage individually rather than maintain group coherence." But even as the human tactics proved effective, Zhang could see the cost. His fleet was taking terrible losses as individual human ships found themselves isolated against vastly superior Devourer vessels. The converted civilian ships were being destroyed with heartbreaking efficiency, their crews buying time and tactical advantage with their lives. "Admiral," Elena called out urgently, "I'm reading massive energy buildup from the Devourer command ship. They're preparing something big." The main display shifted to show the largest Devourer vessel, a construct the size of a small moon, beginning to glow with energies that hurt to observe directly. Around it, smaller vessels were linking their power systems in a network that created geometric patterns of incredible complexity. "They're going to try to end this quickly," Zhang realized. "Whatever they're building up to, it'll be designed to eliminate our tactical advantages." But as he watched the enemy fleet prepare their decisive attack, Zhang noticed something that changed everything. In linking their power systems to create a superweapon, The Devourers had created the most perfect geometric formation they had yet achieved. Every vessel was positioned at precisely calculated coordinates, their energy flows creating patterns of mathematical beauty that were as much art as a weapon. "Elena," he said quietly, "remember what you said about their need for perfection?" She looked at the tactical display, and her eyes widened with understanding. "If we can disrupt the geometry of their formation at the critical moment, the energy feedback could destroy their entire fleet," Zhang finished. "But the timing would have to be perfect, and we need to get close enough to the focal points to make it work." Elena was already running calculations. "We need to sacrifice at least 12 ships to get targeting solutions on all the critical nodes simultaneously. The crews wouldn't survive the approach." Zhang looked around his bridge at officers who had followed him into what everyone knew was humanity's final battle. They had volunteered to fight an enemy that represented the ultimate futility of everything they believed in, and they had done so with the stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had characterized humanity since the first human had looked up at the stars and decided to reach for them. "Open a channel to all fleet commanders," he ordered. As the communication links established, Zhang found himself looking out at a fleet that represented the best and worst of humanity. Ships crewed by soldiers and civilians, poets and killers, saints and sinners, all united by the simple refusal to accept that existence was meaningless even when the universe itself seemed determined to prove them wrong. "All ships," he began, his voice carrying across the fleet. "We've identified a way to end this battle, but it requires volunteers for what will certainly be a one-way mission. I'm not ordering anyone to make this sacrifice. I am asking." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every ship in the fleet volunteered. Every captain requested to be assigned to the suicide mission. Elena watched the communications board light up with volunteers and felt tears streaming down her face as she realized what she was witnessing. The galaxy had never seen anything like humanity because humanity had never been asked to demonstrate what they really were. When faced with the choice between accepting the meaninglessness of existence and making their own meaning through sacrifice, humans chose sacrifice every time. Zhang selected 12 ships based on position and weapons capability, not on volunteering enthusiasm, because that would have required choosing between thousands of equally worthy volunteers. As the selected vessels began their final approach toward the Devourer formation, he opened a final channel to the enemy. Convergence of final understanding, he transmitted. "You're wrong about consciousness, about civilization, and about the nature of meaning in the universe. Meaning isn't something the universe gives us. It's something we create for ourselves. And we choose to create it by protecting those who can't protect themselves." The Devourer response was immediate and tinged with something Zhang had never heard in their communications before: uncertainty. "You sacrifice yourselves for no logical purpose. Your deaths will not prevent the ultimate heat death of a universe. Your civilizations will still fall to entropy. Your struggles are still meaningless." "Maybe," Zhang replied, watching his 12 volunteer ships closing on their targets despite devastating defensive fire. "But there are struggles, and we choose to make them meaningful. That's what you never understood. Meaning isn't about permanence. It's about choice." The volunteer ships reached their positions simultaneously. For a single moment, space was filled with the light of 12 human vessels deliberately overloading their reactors in perfect coordination, their sacrifice timed to disrupt the geometric perfection of the Devourer's superweapon at the critical moment of its firing sequence. The energy feedback was beyond anything in recorded physics. The linked power systems of the Devourer fleet became a network of destruction as the carefully calculated energy flows turned chaotic. Vessels that had survived for millions of years, that had destroyed countless civilizations, that had achieved perfect philosophical understanding of the universe's fundamental nature, died in seconds as their own perfection became the instrument of their destruction. In the aftermath, as debris from both fleets drifted through space around Nexus Prime, Zhang found himself looking at a tactical display that showed impossible victory. The Devourer threat was ended, their fleet destroyed by the very perfection they had spent eons achieving. "Admiral," Elena said quietly, "incoming transmissions from across the galaxy. The other Devourer fleets, they're withdrawing. All of them. It's like they've lost the will to continue their mission." Zhang nodded, understanding flooding through him. The Devourers had believed absolutely in the futility of resistance, the meaninglessness of struggle, the inevitability of despair. But they had just watched a species prove that meaning could be created through choice, that sacrifice could have value even in a universe trending toward entropy, that consciousness could fight the darkness not by transcending it, but by refusing to surrender to it. "Signal all fleets," he ordered. "Begin search and rescue operations. Every survivor, human or devourer, gets medical attention. Every ship that can still fly helps with the recovery effort." As the greatest battle in galactic history gave way to the largest rescue operation in recorded space, Zhang reflected on the question that had started this entire crisis. Elena had asked whether the Galactic Council's experience was incomplete, whether their perfect, peaceful civilization was missing something essential. Now they had their answer. Peace without the capacity for war was paradise without the ability to defend itself. Kindness without the potential for cruelty was compassion without strength. And consciousness without the willingness to create its own meaning was existence without purpose. Humanity had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten in its long journey toward transcendence, that the duality which made them dangerous also made them invaluable. They were the species that could be trusted with both creation and destruction because they understood that sometimes the most loving thing you could do was to be more ruthless than those who would harm the things you loved. In the weeks that followed, as the Galactic Council began the long process of rebuilding not just their civilizations, but their understanding of what civilization could be, they found themselves asking humans to help with more than just military matters. They needed help remembering how to struggle, how to fight for meaning in an indifferent universe, how to choose hope even when logic suggested despair. Because humanity had taught them the most important lesson in the galaxy's history, that consciousness wasn't just an accident of evolution to be transcended, but a rebellion against entropy to be celebrated. And sometimes the greatest kindness was having the cruelty to never surrender, never accept defeat, and never stop making noise in the cosmic dark. The galaxy had learned that when you cross humanity with cruelty, empires tremble. And when you cross humanity with kindness, the very stars weep with joy. But most importantly, they had learned that the choice between those two paths wasn't humanity's alone to make. It was a choice every conscious being had to make every day, in every moment when the universe told them they didn't matter. And humanity's gift to the galaxy was the knowledge that they could choose to matter anyway.